Verizon was created 25 years ago, believe it or not, in June of 2000 with the merger of Bell Atlantic and GTE. Today, it stands as one of the biggest wireless and broadband providers in the United States. And joining us right now with a real-time update on the company's business is Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg. Hans, I have to say, on the one hand, I was like, oh, it's only 25 years old. On the other hand, I remember when you guys created, or when it was created, and when it took the name Verizon, trying to figure out what Verizon meant. I can't believe it's been 25 years since that day.
No, a lot have happened in 25 years, for sure. Of course, Verizon was created of a lot of mergers on the...
It's a weird name. Why'd you guys pick Verizon?
No, so Verizon was a great innovation on my predecessor. It's sort of Veritas for truth and Horizon for looking forward. And then they put together a word that doesn't exist, Verizon.
Because all the real words have been taken already.
Yeah, exactly. No, so I think it was my predecessor were just great leaders that put this together and moved Verizon to the top spot in this market and actually in the world when it comes to telecoms, which you're humble continuing the work they have done. But I also remember, 2000, I was just looking at 2000. Remember, you were doing still kilobits per second in both the wireline and the wireless networks. You hardly didn't send SMS by then, messages. That were not even feasible. So tremendous development. And today we cannot live without mobility and broadband. Of course, Verizon has invested enormously over these years.
That's kind of where the battle stands right now. Now that wireless companies have rolled out this 5G fixed wireless service, that's competing with broadband on a broader scale. And you've got cable companies, wireless providers, all of you guys kind of competing and lowering prices for consumers to win that business.
I think that historically the prices have actually gone up on the service fee. I think what we've seen a little bit on the wireless side has been a competition on promotions when you do want a new phone. And that's where you've seen most of the competition the last couple of years. But of course, it's very important to keep the the levels of pricing up in order to continue to invest. Since I became the CEO of Verizon, we have invested more than $200 billion in the United States of America.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, the big question over the last 25 years is you could argue that you and some of the cable operators and others, you wouldn't like the word monopoly, but you own the train tracks, the railroads, if you will. And whether it was owning them even wirelessly, meaning you had FCC, you had the broadband.
Yeah. Or with the cable, with
the cable, you had the stuff on the ground. The question is, in an era where you have SpaceX, putting up satellites, where you have Amazon now putting up satellites with Kuiper, which is probably 2 or 3 years away from really being commercialized on a massive scale, how all of that changes. And there's been such huge investment made by so many folks, and it may be a multi-layered thing. It may be in big cities, people use fiber because it's easier into the buildings, but in rural places they use satellites. What does that do to the business long term?
I think the satellite business is, as we see it, mostly complementary what we're doing. In certain places that are very rural, we can neither do fiber or even wireless in some cases because electricity is not good enough there. So that's definitely a case. Then our use cases also with satellites, with vessels and things like that cannot be reached by traditional telecom. So for me, they're more a partner to me than anything else. Then, of course, going to be fringes of competition. But if you go to a dense city like this, satellite cannot work because of the density of it. So I think it's going to be more complementary. And again, it's about to give the customers ubiquitous connectivity.
Is it worth using your broadband for fixed line wireless? Because there is an argument to be made that over time, you may actually try to move the fixed line basically to the phone, that there's more money for you in being sort of purely wireless on a margin basis.
Yeah, spend a lot of time on that. But I think about it like this. From the data center, wherever you have your data, it's a streaming service, whatever you have, until the edge of the network, everything is fiberized because that's where all the data goes. Then at the edge of the network, we decide if I use a mobile phone or if I use a fixed line or whatever. That's the future because there are different use cases, different preferences of customers. So for me, it's the most important. That's what I did when I came into Verizon, was to fiberize everything from the data center to the edge of the network, harmonize it, have redundancy. And then at the edge, we decide, do you have 4G phone, 5G phone, do you have fiber, do you have fixed wireless access? Different type of access technology. If you're a big enterprise, you have different demands if you're a consumer. So that's how I see the future of the world.
How much are you spending to build out fiber to the last mile to the home for consumers?
So right now we're building roughly 650,000 new passings a year. But of course I have the pending acquisition of Frontier. When we combine that, it's going to be way more, and we're going to be actually with fiber in 31 states.
How much is that in terms of CapEx on an annual basis?
We never disclose exactly the CapEx because we change a lot inside. We have been on a business as usual investment on $18 to $18.5 billion in the network every year.
There's the question that's been brought up recently just about whether you're losing more customers because you've raised prices when it comes to postpaid phone customers. In the first quarter, Verizon lost 289,000 of them. That matches the worst quarter on record for Verizon. What happened?
I think that the first quarter, first of all, is usually a slower quarter from postpaid consumer. And we had some price increases there. We had some churn. So it's actually, it was sort of planned for us. But the difference was also that our prepaid was doing way better. Ultimately, I look at all customers in all customers group. You talk about consumers, and I look at how many customers do I put on my platform that are profitable. That's really what we think about. And the prepaid business on the first quarter was the best quarter ever on prepaid. So it's a balance in between them. But ultimately, we of course want to gain customers in all our segments because we're number one in all our wireless segments.
Andrew brings up just how many more competitors you have at this point. Who do you consider your biggest competitors?
There are many that want to compete with us. If you're number one in basically everything you do, you have different competitors. I have different competitors on fiber, on fixed wireless access. Right. I have different on wireless for government. I have different on the consumer, postpaid or prepaid. There are different customers, different brands that we're competing with. So I wouldn't say that I have one competitor. I have many.
Okay, here's a question. You're mostly a domestic business.
Yeah, my business is global, but yes.
Right. But my question, actually, with the business-to-business piece, is as these data centers go everywhere, there's been a long question about whether you really need to be global, and whether you can be global, whether regulators would allow you to genuinely be global, what kind of costs you could take out of the business if it was a truly global business. I mean, I remember in the late 90s covering when there was, questions about what Verizon and Vodafone would ultimately merge. Yeah. This was in the UK. This is 25 years ago.
We were sort of merged in the United States. Mm-hmm. The regulation, of course, is preventing the consumer and wireless business to be global because historically there's no synergies in between different companies across the globe because of the regulation. I mean, you see that in Europe right now where you see more and more companies going to fewer and fewer markets. So you're right. It's hard to see, actually. But the business to business, if you follow the large enterprise customers, the large banks sitting around here, they want one provider in the world to supply them with private IP networks. And that we can do because we have different assets and we have different partners.